Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to the Cornerstone Church Sermons podcast. To learn more about our ministry and how we're helping people follow Jesus, visit our website at cornerstonechurch.community. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram under the name cstone.central. We hope you enjoy today's message.
Well, happy Mother's Day to each of you moms. And I've got to say, Mother's Day has taken on a new and special meaning for me this year. Let me explain, and it'll take me a minute. In Numbers chapter 6, there is this declaration of a blessing from God to his people. And at the center of that blessing is this phrase, "May the Lord make his face to shine upon you." Now, what that means is that when you see the face of God, what you experience is his joy-filled expression toward you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you. You see, moms, you were the ones who first gave us a glimpse of the face of God. You held us as infants, and we looked up and experienced the joy you felt for us. And it wasn't just in the days of being an infant. It was every day. As we came busting in the back door from playing outside, or maybe from our first day at school, maybe it was just from being in the other room for a moment, and we walked in the room and we saw the joy on your face that you felt toward us. Moms, for all these years, you have been a gift from God to us, teaching us about the face of God toward us. Thank you. And as we think about that, not seeing the joy that God has on his face toward you has some of us stuck. So important is experiencing the joy-filled face of God toward you that we're going to spend the month of July talking about how do I view God. But until then, let me just say, moms, you have given us a glimpse of the joy-filled face of God when you looked at us in that same way. And for today, on Mother's Day, we're going to celebrate how our moms are often one of the most important guardians of our lives. We're going to meet two moms in our passage today and recognize, wow, the things we do to guard ourselves, healthy habits, like our moms were one of the first to challenge us with what we were eating or sleep rhythms and studying for school. You have been guardians for us in so many ways. And as parents, you've taught us how to set up those healthy guardrails and boundaries in our lives so we can more fully follow Jesus. And that's what we're going to talk about, how you can be a mighty woman of God and stand up for what God has for us. So go ahead and grab your Bible. We're headed to Judges chapter 4. It's page 157 if you grab one of the pocket Bibles in front of you. And we're going to take a look at an incredible account of two women of God who rise up in a really special way. Now, let me warn you, Judges is a really heavy book. One of the opening and repeated phrases is that they did not remove the people from the land. So here's what's going on in Judges. God promised a land to his people. He actually gave that promise to Abraham. He began to fulfill it through Joshua's leadership as they went into the promised land, but they did not finish the job. They settled. They allowed the people who had been in the promised land to stay near them, even though God had said, hey, this is a gift for you, remove the other people. And they were bearing the consequences of it. They did not remove the people from the land, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And we see what I would call the spiral of the Judges. So if I gave an extended title to this book, I'd call it the spiral of the Judges, because it's more than a cycle. What would happen is they would stray from God, they would land themselves in a total mess, and God would raise up a judge to deliver them. And then they'd do it again. But it wasn't just a repeat, it was a spiral into an absolute mess. So if you read the last 2 or 3 chapters, it's pretty gruesome. Like nasty sexual assault, chopping up a woman's body and mailing the pieces across the country. Civil war breaks out. They utterly destroy the tribe of Benjamin, and then they go destroy Jabesh Gilead to get wives to repopulate. I mean, it is utter chaos as they spiral into this abyss. How did it happen? Everybody did what was right in their own eyes. You wonder how this thing plays out in America? This you do you speak your truth, what's right for you is right for you. You want to see how this plays out? Read the book of Judges. It is heavy. And yet what we see in the spiral is God continues to raise up judges to deliver and call people back to God. We have an incredible privilege of hearing God's call and inspiring people to see the life that he has made possible through Jesus Christ. We have that privilege. The first woman to step into this role, her name is Deborah. Look in verse 4, we kind of see her resume. Deborah was a prophetess, a wife, and a judge. Now, I've already told you that the book of Judges is about these deliverers who God raises up to free his people from oppression. Now, Deborah was a unique judge. She was more like what you think of when you imagine Judge Deborah in a black robe making legal decisions. She actually did that. Best I can tell, no other judge did that. Her role as deliverer was also the role as one people trusted. They flocked to her, similar to God's people flocking to Moses from sun up to sundown, asking Moses to speak into their life situations. Deborah was doing that. So she was a judge. Secondly, we discover that she is a wife and a prophetess. Now, it doesn't show up in your English translation, but it actually says female prophetess, which is not wrong, it's just redundant. It would be like me saying she is a female actress. Well, yeah, actress is female. So why would you say female actress? There seems to be a hint in the text that God is specifically celebrating the fact that she is a woman. Now, a prophetess is one who receives a message from God to be delivered to other people. And that's exactly where we jump into the text. She has been given a message by God to be shared with Barak. And interestingly, it was a message he too had received. Verse 6, here we go. Deborah summoned Barak. Now he's the military leader for God's people. Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, go gather your men at Mount Tabor? That was a military fortress. I, God, will draw out Sisera. This is the military commander for the Canaanites who are right now oppressing Israel. And I will give him into your hand. So Barak, God's people's army, Sisera, the oppressor's army. And Deborah says to Barak, hey, God told me something he already told you. Did not God tell you to go to Mount Tabor, and that in you following God in that way, he would draw out Sisera? Yes, I know the 900 chariots. They are scary people. But that God would bring him out with all of his chariots and give him into your hand. Didn't he already tell you that? Now the story gets really interesting because this female prophetess renowned in the region. Everybody loves her. Everybody trusts her. She receives a word from the Lord and goes to Barak and says, hey, didn't the Lord already tell you this? And he said, yes. Yes, he did. What I love about what Deborah is doing is she is not trying to take it for herself. She does not say, okay, Barak, get out of the way. I'll take over. Instead, she is challenging him to be the man God called him to be. She is challenging him to do what God called him to do, to lead the army. So we're studying this text, and I'm thinking, man, Barak's a wimp. Like, this is pathetic. Man up. Except he's not a wimp. He is the military commander. And as we studied it, Dustin said, what if he knows? What if he realizes the pattern that has held throughout all of Judges, that when they went to fight and the Lord was not with them, it was utter destruction? What if Barak realized that he did not carry the presence of the Lord, but Deborah did? You see, there are some of you as moms who find yourself in a really intimidating situation. You've not felt like the presence of the Lord is with you. For some of you, you're new moms, and you came home from the hospital and thought, they sent me home with a human. I have no idea what I'm going to do. Or maybe it started really well for you, but you're in this season where you've thought, I have no idea what to do. For Caroline and me, this is the 28th Mother's Day that we've gotten to celebrate as a family. And I would just say vulnerably, it's become the hardest. Like, we've been in one of those seasons like, I'm not even sure what we should do with this. And as Barak was invited by Deborah to go with the presence of God, so are you. Moms, we don't need you to be the hero of the story. We need you to remind us who the hero is. And so if you find yourself with one of those humans, or you find yourself in a season where you're like, I don't know what to do, I would encourage you to take that posture of palms up. That your dependence would be upon God's presence, not even how awesome you are. And it's not even bad for you, the kids, to see you do that. Like, imagine you're in one of those situations and your kids look over and you're like this. And they say, Mom, what are you doing? And you get to tell them who you are trusting. Or they say, Mom, what are you doing with your palms like that? You get to say, well, what I want to do with my palms is this. I want to wring your neck. But I'm trusting the Lord in this situation that we find ourselves in. You might want to leave the room. Barak said, I'll go if you'll go. Deborah carried the presence of God with her. And Barak knew that if God was not with them, they would be defeated. Here's Deborah's response, verse 9. I will surely go with you. She says, yep, you're right, I'm going. She was a prophetess. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory. For the Lord will sell Sisera, remember the enemy commander, into the hand of a woman. Now you read that verse and at first, I'm reading that thinking, yeah, Deborah's thinking it's all about her. Like, Barak, you didn't do it. And now the show's going to be mine. But remember, that's not what she did. She was calling Barak to be the man God called him to be. She was not trying to steal the spotlight. She was, as a guardian, challenging Barak to be the man God created him to be. So now she says, hey, I am going with you. Yes. God will accomplish his plan, the victory he promised to you. But now, it won't be about what God did through you. God will take Sisera out through the hands of a woman. Here's how thrilling this gets. God does have a plan, and he will accomplish that plan. And he's inviting you into it. He will get done what he is going to get done, and he's inviting you to be part of it. Should you decline, he will find another way. As our team was studying it, Stephanie said, as a mom, God will accomplish his will using whoever he will. He will get it done. And he's inviting you to be part of it. But if you decline, he will get it done. Now, there's another parallel to the Moses story. For those of you who are students of the Bible, you know that God sent Moses to lead God's people out of slavery in Egypt. God appears to Moses through a burning bush and says, Moses, go to Pharaoh and declare to him from me, let my people go. 4 words. But Moses said, I don't speak so well. And God's like, 4 words? I don't need you to be an orator. I don't need you to be an impressive spokesman. Say 4 words. Let my people go. And Moses said, I don't know. I don't speak so well. And God says, okay, wait. Throw your staff on the ground. Turned it into a serpent. Grab the serpent's tail. Back to a staff. Stick your hand in your cloak. Put it back in. Leprosy, no leprosy. God said, Moses, I don't need you to show off. I don't need you to be powerful. I don't need you to speak well even. My power will be on display. I need you to say 4 words. Let my people go. And Moses said, well, I don't speak so well. Fine, God says. Take Aaron with you. Now, here's what I wonder. I don't know. I don't know. Here's what I wonder. Had Moses said, okay, I'll go. Could the whole incident with the golden calf have been avoided? 3,000 people die, led by Aaron to worship this golden calf that he made out of their gold jewelry. Could it have been avoided? I don't know. God has a plan. He will get it done, and he's inviting you into it. Should you say no, he'll find someone else. Deborah introduces us to the second woman of God. Her name is Jael. But before we meet her, let's go back to the battle. So Barak says, okay, I'll go. You're with me. Let's do it. And so they head out. He gets the army together. That's where it gets interesting. Barak was no wimp. He is leading, as we'll find in chapter 5 when Deborah reflects back, a militia, which means he has a bunch of volunteer soldiers. He is leading volunteer soldiers. Our translation says 10,000 soldiers, but it's literally 10 contingents or 10 units. We don't know exactly how many soldiers there were, but there was this big group of soldiers who were volunteers who were going to do battle against 900 chariots led by Sisera. They go up to the fortress where they would have been safe to stay there. And then God prompts them to leave the fortress where they are vulnerable to these 900 chariots. These men were not wimps. Barak was not a coward. They did what God was leading them to do, prompted by an incredible woman of God who called them to it. They went out, and here came Sisera. And God did what he promised he would do. He absolutely destroyed them. Look at verse 15. And the Lord routed Sisera. The word routed means to defeat in such a way there was utter chaos. When you read scripture of God going to battle, you regularly see that kind of description. The people who had come against God are just in utter chaos, many times hurting each other. God is the one who fought this battle. That is absolutely clear. They routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak and the edge of the sword, and Sisera got down from the chariot and fled away on foot. Again, I read this text, I'm like, well, here's another coward. Well, maybe. But you've seen some of those military scenes where the general, the commander, sits way back and looks over and gives directions to the soldiers. Maybe that's how it was this time. I mean, I read it at first and thought, wow, he's abandoning ship while the ship's going down with all his men. Maybe, or maybe he was just the one far enough back he actually was able to slip away. The whole point is, this is not about whether Sisera was awesome or Barak was awesome. This is the hand of God. Sisera gets away and he's on the run because God has brought the victory. Back to our spiral of the judges. If you're familiar with the story, you know it just gets worse and worse. I already told you that part. And if you're familiar with the story, you're like, oh, there you go. God's people at it again, not obeying the Lord, which is kind of our story. And maybe you find yourself in that spiral. Maybe you've been running from God. Maybe God sent a deliverer for you and then you wandered back away. Here's the reality of the gospel. Just as God saved his people from utter destruction and the continued spiral into oblivion, that's what God offers you through Jesus. I don't know where you're at in the cycle, but without Jesus, you'll keep cycling, hunting for something to bring hope, and it will disappoint you, and on down the spiral you go. If you depend on you, you will do this with your hands and hurt somebody. On into the spiral you go, and yet just as God invited them again to discover his power and his presence, he's inviting you into that today. He is inviting you to discover that no matter what you have done, Jesus proved God's love for you, willingly going to the cross to receive on himself what we deserve. This is the gospel right here in Judges chapter 4. God's patience, his loving kindness, and his invitation to his people yet again to come back and experience his power and his presence. Sisera experienced the power of God from a distance, and he's on the run from it. And he comes running into the territory of the Kenites. Now, what's important about that is that the Canaanites, Sisera's nation, and the Kenites had a peace treaty. And so he thinks when he shows up into the land of the Kenites, he's safe. But he's not yet met Jael. Here she is, verse 18. And Jael came out to meet Sisera and said to him, turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, do not be afraid. So he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. Now, we can't know all the dynamics at play here because it is Jael's husband, Heber, who actually formed this treaty with the king of Canaan, Jabin. Now, we don't know Heber's intent. Maybe he had no choice. Maybe he's just trying to save his family by agreeing to a peace treaty with the powerful King Jabin. Maybe he's a crooked politician and he's making money off of this peace treaty with Jabin, king of Canaan. Maybe, we don't know. What we do know is that Jael knew there was a treaty, but when Sisera came into town, she gonna take him out. What we do know is that she's aware of the battle, Israel against Canaan. We do know that she understands Barak is chasing Sisera. And we do know somehow that she senses that God has called her to be a guardian, to stop the man, Sisera, who is set on destroying God's people. and she's going to do it. So he comes into town saying, hey, I could use a place to hide. And she said, oh yeah, come on over to my place. Let me take care of you. So he does. And he comes in, she covers him up with a rug. He asks for some water, she gives him some milk. And he says, hey, if anybody else comes into town looking for me, tell him I am not in here. She leaves the tent, stands outside. Instead of standing on guard for Sisera, she waits until he is asleep. Utter exhaustion, asleep. And she goes back into the tent, takes a tent peg, and drives it through his temple. Now, it's Mother's Day, so I'm going to keep it genteel. If it were like Father's Day or a men's conference, we'd get really gory right in this part. But she stuck a fatal blow to his cranium. How about that? No good? So she kills him. And I'm like, what? What? Was she scared? Where do you learn a move like that? One shot? I mean, I have all kinds of really weird thoughts about a tent peg going through somebody's temple, and it says she drove the stake into the ground, pinned him to the ground. This woman was used by God to be a guardian for his people. And ladies, I want to challenge you. You may not feel qualified to be a Deborah, a prophetess and judge that everybody knows and everybody trusts. But maybe the Lord has called you to be a Jael who would say, not on my watch. And she drove that stake into the ground as a guardian for God's people. And there he lay. She goes back out of the tent, and here comes Barak. As Barak was pursuing Sisera, verse 22, Jael went out to meet him and says, hey, come and I will show you the man whom you are seeking. There lay Sisera dead with the tent peg in his temple. Now I'm wondering, how quickly does Barak have the words of Deborah echo in his mind? How quickly did he know, she's the one? Pretty quickly. He didn't have to destroy Sisera. Sisera was dead. Wow. God has a plan. He's invited you into it. If you say no, he will use who he will. He'll get it done. And this woman named Jael stepped up as a guardian for God's people. And the same thing happened as happened with Deborah. Jael does not try to steal the show. She does not say, hey, you need me to lead your army? Hey, you need me to do your job? Nope. She just did what God gave her to do. And then the story gets really inspiring. If you look in verse 23, we find that the hand of the people of Israel pressed harder and harder against Jabin, the king of Canaan, and they destroyed Jabin, the king of Canaan. Ding, 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 ding. That's what you were supposed to do at the beginning. Receive the land I have for you and remove the people that are there because it's for you. Suddenly, the people are doing what they were supposed to be doing from the beginning. What did it take? It took, number one, them seeing Deborah with Barak and the military forces of Sisera decimated. Number two, it took them hearing the story of Jael who drove a tent peg through Sisera's head. And then they realized, wow, the Lord is with us. And they took off to do what God had commanded them to do previously, and they missed it. But because of two incredible women of God who were guardians of God's people, everybody rose up. So ladies, which one are you in this story? Are you Deborah, prophetess, wife, beloved judge? Some of you are. Some of you are known in our church as mighty women of God. Know this, he has given you a message. He has given you a platform to call us to rise up and be men and women of God. You say, well, I don't want to make it about me. You don't have to make it about you. Call God's people to rise up. Use the platform and the giftedness and the relationship you have with us to encourage us to be and do who God has called us to be and do. And others of you, you would say, Michael, you don't understand. I'm young. I'm unknown. Maybe you would even say, I have a really bad marriage. My husband's not a believer. I'm single. I don't have a job. I don't have a good job. Jael was unknown. All we know about her is she's a wife of this dude who brokered a peace treaty and that she lives in a tent. That's not a very impressive resume. And yet God used her dramatically. Maybe you have felt unqualified for where you have been or where you are right now. Know this, if you as a woman of God, old or young, will place your palms up and point us to the presence and power of God, you will be blown away how God uses you to help us see his face and how God uses you to encourage us to be and do the people God has called us to be and do. And this morning, I want to challenge you. Don't just take my word for it. I want to invite you to hear from three of our mothers in what it looks like to be that kind of woman of God. Take a look.
I think motherhood is a privilege that I don't think any of us really realize, or I know I didn't realize. It is overwhelming and awesome at the same time.
I love my kids. My kids are like, there's Jesus and then there's my kids.
One of my favorite things about motherhood is the uniqueness of each child. We've had 5 kids and we have yet to have a repeat. They're all so very different. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to see as these little image bearers grow up, to see the different ways they show us different characteristics of God.
There have been a lot of challenges in being a mother and raising children. Just the peer pressure and trying to guide them, yet give them a little bit of leeway to make choices. It is a terrible thing to do because you want to control everything.
Even with homeschooling, there's no way to protect them from everything that's going to come at them. But if we can have a relationship with them in which they're comfortable coming back to us and saying, hey, I don't know what to do with this. Hey, we had this conversation. I heard this. Like, how do I handle that?
Love your kids enough to correct them. Love your kids enough to not go with the norm. Love your kids enough to forgive them. Love your kids enough to see you walk in forgiveness and love. And just love your kids enough to say, I'm sorry when it's needed.
Something I would share would be to see your role as a mom as a holy calling from God, not just an extra thing you do, but a holy privilege to shepherd these little kids, to shepherd kids, whether you have babies, toddlers, teenagers, adults, to point them to Jesus, and then to enjoy that time with them. So take a walk, stop for all the dandelions, listen to your teenager tell you again about that video game that you still don't quite get, or stop and draw a picture, but enjoy them and let them know that you enjoy that time with them.
It's never too late to embrace God, embrace a relationship with him, and let your children see that God is the most important thing in your life. Would I like to wipe out some of my history? Maybe. But it's all there for a purpose. I've seen what God has done through me and then through my children, because they are, for the most part, following and have a relationship relationship with God and choosing God on their own. And that